Do you feel cooked when it comes to writing the introductions for your rhetorical analysis essay? When you go to write the introduction for your rhetorical analysis essay, do you know it needs to set up everything else that follows, but everyone around you is already writing and you're totally lost? And you start to freak out and your essay is a disaster? What? I'm Dr. Clay Zuba, inventor of Zubify. I've scored thousands of rhetorical analysis essays, and I understand what separates introductions that crash from those that absolutely dominate. By the end of this video, you'll be writing introductions that feel so strategic that your reader feels like they are a heat-sinking missile that drives toward your thesis. Yes. Welcome back to the Rhetorical Analysis Mastery Series. Today, we'll be continuing to work from the 2025 Rhetorical Analysis prompt about Raquel Vasquez Gilliland's essay, Go Outside, Sink Your Feet into the Dirt, that we used in part 1 and 2 when we learned to read prompts like kings and queens, select killer evidence, and construct those GOAT-level theses that made AP readers take notice. Today in part 3, you'll know exactly how to set up the rhetorical situation, present the persuasion problem, and position your thesis as a solution. Let's build those introductions that make your analysis feel inevitable. Now, no matter what type of essay you're writing, your introduction has one job: show your reader the problem that your thesis answers and that your essay will solve. In the case of rhetorical analysis essays, your problem is always some variation of how did the speaker persuade this audience in this rhetorical situation according to their purpose. Your thesis then becomes the answer to that exact question. Think about it. Your reader needs to understand why your analysis matters. They need to see the stakes of the persuasion and the rhetorical challenges that your speaker must overcome before they can appreciate it. Your introduction sets up the problem. Your thesis provides the solution. When you frame your essay as solving a specific rhetorical problem, you're already thinking like a sophisticated analyst. Yes. Here's a tip that many students don't realize. The prompt already contains everything that they need for the introduction, and you don't need to bring a lot of extensive background knowledge. Everything is right there. Let's take a look at our Gilliland prompt. We can see here the author, Mexican-American poet, novelist, and painter, Raquel Vasquez Gilliland. We can see the publication, which is the New York Times 2023. We can see the topic, Go Outside, Sink Your Feet into the Dirt and Engage with the World. That title kind of already says what the essay's about. It also tells us the focus. It works on myths, folklore, motherhood, and plants. This data tells you everything you need to know about the rhetorical situation: the speaker, purpose, audience, context, and exigence. New York Times readers in 2023, they're busy, urban, probably skeptical about slowing down for nature. A Mexican-American artist writing about indigenous wisdom? There's a cultural bridge that this author needs to build. The rhetorical situation is already programmed into this essay in the prompt. You just need to unpack it and show it to your reader. Now that you can see how to mine the prompt for information, your introduction must frame the specific persuasion challenge that your author faces. This isn't some variation of the author wants to persuade people of blank. It has to be much more precise. The basic equation here is author plus audience plus purpose equals the rhetorical challenge. That's what your essay needs to show. For Gilliland, we're thinking about how does a Mexican-American poet convince busy New York Times readers to engage with nature through indigenous practices? See the challenge? She's asking time-pressed urban professionals to slow down, connect with the earth, and embrace wisdom that might seem foreign to their lifestyle. That's a specific persuasion problem that requires strategic rhetorical choices. If you can show these issues in your introduction, your reader can understand what puzzle that your thesis is going to solve. You can think of the structure of your introduction as following a simple GPS route. Sentences 1 to 2 should load the rhetorical situation. That is to show the author, audience, context, and purpose. In sentences 3 to 4, present the persuasion problem and challenges. In the final sentence, that's your thesis. That's the solution. And that's where you show your ideas about how the author used rhetorical choices for this audience to solve this persuasion problem. This structure pre-programs or forecasts your essay for the reader. They will know who's speaking, who's listening, what the challenge is, and how to think, and how you think the author solves it. Your thesis then becomes the natural conclusion to the setup you've created. And when you refer back to this introduction in your body, your reader will already know what you're talking about and can firmly place your argument in the rhetorical situation. Now let's look at 3 examples and see how they follow or don't follow the structure of an effective introduction to rhetorical analysis. Example 1. Since the beginning of time, people have always tried to connect with nature. In today's society, people are very busy and don't have time for nature. Nature is part of the world and we must appreciate it. Nature contains animals and birds that we can appreciate. Raquel Vasquez Gilliland writes about her grandmother and going outside. She talks about many different things like gardens and trees. Gilliland uses imagery, personal stories, and other techniques to convince people that nature is important. This introduction is cooked. It's wrong, and it makes some common student mistakes. It uses a generic cliché hook. It summarizes content instead of analyzing the rhetorical situation. It has a vague audience, people. It has no specific challenges identified. Let's look at a better and acceptable type of introduction. Raquel Vasquez Gilliland, a Mexican-American author, published an opinion article in the New York Times in 2023 titled, "Go Outside, Sink Your Feet into the Dirt and Engage with the World." The article encourages readers to spend time in nature. Gilliland uses personal anecdotes and vivid imagery to persuade New York Times readers that engaging with nature is important and can improve their well-being. This introduction is better. It identifies the basic rhetorical situation, speaker, audience, context, and exigence, but it is missing the specific rhetorical challenges. In other words, this writer is not telling the reader, why is this persuasion task difficult? Why did it have to exist in the first place? What challenges do the speaker need to overcome with this specific audience? Now, let's read a very effective introduction. In her 2023 New York Times opinion piece, "Go Outside, Sink Your Feet into the Dirt and Engage with the World," Mexican-American poet Raquel Vasquez Gilliland faces complex persuasion challenge, convincing busy urban professionals to embrace nature connection through indigenous practices. Writing for readers who likely prioritize efficiency and may view traditional ecological wisdom as impractical or mystical, Gilliland must bridge cultural divides while making nature feel accessible rather than overwhelming. Through intimate family narratives, sensory-rich imagery, and practical problem-solving structure, Gilliland transforms her grandmother's traditional teachings into concrete, achievable actions that speak directly to contemporary urban anxieties about disconnection and isolation. Wow. Now that is clocked. Full rhetorical persuasion, specific challenges explained, and a thesis that directly addresses how those challenges are overcome. Speaking of things that are clocked, are you enjoying and learning from this video at the same time? What? That's what we're trying to do. Do me a solid and like and subscribe so you and others like you can continue to learn from Zubify. Yes. Now, notice how this last introduction makes the thesis feel inevitable. Of course she uses these specific strategies for these specific challenges with this specific audience. If you've written your introduction correctly, your thesis makes sense, is the answer to your question. Here are some common introduction mistakes to make sure that you avoid. 1. Starting with generic and cliché hooks like, since the beginning of time, people have always. Moves like this are too vague to start to put your reader in the rhetorical question, and your reader will think that you're wasting their time. Mistake 2, summarizing passage content instead of analyzing the rhetorical situation. 3, being too vague about audience, like saying people instead of New York Times readers. If you can't specify the audience, it's going to be hard for you to show why the persuasion is effective. And it's going to make your reader think that you think that rhetorical persuasions happens in a vacuum. It doesn't. Audience and rhetorical situation matter. And 4, ignoring the rhetorical challenges. In other words, not explaining why this persuasion would be difficult for the speaker and why they needed to employ these rhetorical choices in the first place. If you can avoid these traps, your introduction automatically levels up. And when an AP reader starts to read your essay, they're going to be impressed and they're already going to think that your essay deserves a high score. Remember, your introduction is your essay's GPS system. It tells your reader exactly where you're going and why the journey matters. When you set up the rhetorical situation and present the specific persuasion challenges, your thesis then looks like the natural solution to those challenges. Next up, I'll show you how to convert your thesis into body paragraphs that deliver on everything that your introduction promises. Drop a comment with your practice introduction using your excellent structure, and I'll give you feedback. Hit subscribe to keep building your rhetorical analysis mastery. Yes! Thanks for watching Zubify. Come back for more Zubify.